Well, I am very excited about the future and the 7th month on God's calendar. And in looking for an appropriate timing to be called home, the 7th month on God's calendar seems a more opportune time than any other time. And there's not just one date that I want to look at, but there's many dates within that 7th month on God's calendar that I'd like to consider as possibilities. So let's begin. Now the 7th month in 1 Kings 8:2, it says it's called Ethanim. But the Hebrew calendar calls it Tishri. And basically Tishri means to begin, beginning. And yet we are told in God's Word what the true New Year is. The beginning, the first month, is called Abib. And that's mentioned in Exodus 12:2, 13:4, and 23:15. So what is the meaning of Ethanim, the 7th month on God's calendar? And so this word Ethanim means enduring, meaning to continue. Permanence, hence concrete, permanent, especially a chieftain. Hard, mighty, rough, strength, strong. It really gives a good description of what the first 144,000 have been going through. Now, I was very pleased to see that there's still a connection, and I can feel it, to the theme of the Feast of First Fruits of Wine that is mentioned in the Dead Sea Scrolls of the 5th month. And that connection is first mentioned in Deuteronomy 16:13, where it says, "Thou shalt observe the Feast of Tabernacles 7 days after that thou hast gathered in thy corn and thy wine." And it's also mentioned in the book of Jubilees, chapter 7, verses 1 and 2, where it says, "In the 7th week, in the first year thereof, in this Jubilee, Noah planted vines on the mountain on which the ark had rested, named Lobar, one of the Ararat mountains, and they produced fruit in the 4th year. And he guarded their fruit and gathered it in this year in the 7th month. And he made wine therefrom and put it into a vessel." Now notice also the time was 13:20 a.m., which would actually be 1:20 a.m. I don't know if that will be time specific to when maybe the first fruits will be changed and put into a new vessel or not. Now, because this didn't happen in the 5th month and instead might happen in the 7th month, it's interesting that John 2:10 says, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." And the "you" in this sense was Yahushua himself, who indeed had saved the wine till then, where he had changed the water to wine. And Matthew 19:30 says, "But many that are first shall be last, and the last shall be first." Now I feel this is all about God's timing. Joel 2:1 says, "Blow the trumpet in Zion and sound the alarm in my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord is coming, for it is at hand." And then verses 15 and 16 say, "Blow the trumpet in Zion, sanctify a fast, call a solemn assembly, let the bridegroom go forth of his chamber, the bride out of her closet." Now, although Numbers 10:10 mentions that in the beginning of the months ye shall blow the trumpets over your burnt offerings, I don't think this is the same of which Leviticus 23:24 and Numbers 29:1 are talking about when it says, basically to speak to the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, the first day of the month, shall ye have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing trumpets, holy convocation. And on the date of the first day of the 7th month on God's calendar, it matches this year Gregorian calendar with September 19th. And as we are told in Luke 21:28, to look up, for your redemption draweth nigh. If we look up on September 19th, we see the sun clothing the constellation of Virgo, and the moon right beside the feet of the constellation of Virgo, the Virgin. Now, many have thought that the event that Revelation 12:1-2 talks about, where it says, there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, with child, cried, travailing, and birth, and pain to be delivered. Happened in 2017 on September 23rd. But I don't believe that that is the timing of when that happened. And instead, there's a date, September 19th, could be the time. And why is because many back then treated the 12 stars as this constellation of Leo, and also Venus, Mars, and Mercury adding into that. But many don't know that there are actually 12 stars in the head of the constellation of Virgo all the time, two of which are called double stars. That's why instead of 10 stars, there is 12 stars. Now, although we don't actually see the moon under her feet on the 19th or the 20th, we see that it is by her feet. And the root word for under is G529, which actually means by or under. So either or. So as you can see, all these things that Revelation 12:1 tells us about, the sun clothing her, the moon by her feet, 12 stars on her head, all are within the constellation Virgo at this timing of September 19th. So the first day of the 7th month on God's calendar is what some call Rosh Hashanah and others call the Feast of Trumpets. Now it just so happens that Sister Sherry has told us that Yahushua was born during Rosh Hashanah, and during that time, the date of his birthday, it fell on what would be our September 11th. But she finishes then up by saying, but his birthday always follows the cycle of Rosh Hashanah, not the cycle of September 11th. And she further says, but if you look at the time he was born, the Rosh Hashanah festival was. He was born on September 11th in the year he was born. And now that same time frame can float the end of September to October. In this date of September 19th on the Gregorian calendar and the first day of the 7th month on God's calendar, it could be a time to definitely look for as being called home to our new creation, and that could be a double meaning, whether it be our new wineskin, our new bodies, angelic bodies, or our new home prepared by Yahushua. Now, because Revelation 12:1 has to do with the delivery of the woman to the man-child, we read in Leviticus 12:2 that it says, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, if a woman hath conceived seed and born a man-child, then she shall be unclean 7 days." Verse 3 says, "Then in the 8th day the flesh of his foreskin should be circumcised," and that's for a man-child. So that's what happened with Yahushua. The 8th day of the 7th month, he was circumcised. Also, we see that the woman is clean after the 7th day. On the 8th day, she's considered clean. So this 8th day of the 7th month would match on the Gregorian calendar of September 26, 2020 this year. And this would possibly be a time again to look for being cut off from the world for a while. And I've read that circumcision is a kind of cutting off of the flesh with an eye towards living in the spirit and not walking in the flesh. Now, Sister Sherry told us that Father told her to tell them, "I'm coming soon for my faithful warriors, those who have been on the front lines, producing fruit for me, fighting against my enemies, doing exploits for me. The Ark of the Covenant is in heaven with me when I return at my second coming. But it is not here right now. It is hidden on earth in Ohio. At your feet. Tell them, child, tell them it is there and that you'll bring it home to me." And then Sister Sherry further explained that these ones on the front line, he's taking, be it first, is the ones who are on the front lines. He's taking them home, and when they leave, they're going to take the Ark of the Covenant with them. Now, why these statements are significant is because also on this day in history, guess what else happened? We are told that this was the start of the timing of when the Ark of the Covenant was brought to Jerusalem by King Solomon. 1 Kings 8:2 and 3, it says, "All the men of Israel assembled themselves to King Solomon at the feast in the month of Ethanim, which is in the 7th month, and all the elders of Israel came, and the priests took up the ark." Verses 4 and 6 said, "And they brought up the ark of the Lord and the tabernacle and the congregation and all the holy vessels that were in the tabernacle, even those did the priests and the Levites bring up. Then the priests brought the ark of the covenant of the Lord to its place into the inner sanctuary of the house, the most holy place, under the wings of the cherub." In both 2 Chronicles 7:9, 1 Kings 8:6-5, talk about these 7 days and 7 days, total 14 days. 2 Chronicles 7:9 says, "And in the 8th day they made a solemn assembly, for they kept the dedication of the altar 7 days, the feast 7 days." Now when it says in the 8th day, I do believe that very well could be a reference to the 8th day of the 7th month. However, it also could be the 8th day after the first 7 days, and or after the second 7th day. So the 8th day could be a reference to a few things. Now in 1 Kings 8:65, it then says, "So Solomon observed the feast at that time, and all Israel with him, a great assembly to the entrance of Hamath to the brook of Egypt, before the Lord our God for 7 days and 7 more days, even 14 days. So again, the first 7 days, the start of it, would be on the 8th day of the 7th month, which matches with the 26th day of September on the Gregorian calendar.
So the next day of interest is the 10th day of the 7th month, which Leviticus 23:27 says, also on the 10th day of the 7th month there shall be a day of atonement. It shall be a holy convocation unto you, and ye shall afflict your souls and offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. And you shall do no work in that same day, for it is a day of atonement, to make an atonement for you before the Lord your God. Now, this might be, I'm not saying it is or it isn't, it might be the fast that Joel 2 talks about when it says sanctify them. We turn to Jubilees chapter 34, and starting in verses 12 and 13, we find out the true reason for the Day of Atonement. What we first find out is that the sons of Jacob slaughtered a kid. They dipped the coat of Joseph in the blood and sent it to Jacob, their father, on the 10th of the 7th month. Now he mourned all that night, for they had brought it to him in the evening, and he became feverish with mourning for his death, and said, evil beast hath devoured Joseph. And all the members of the house mourned with him that day, and they were grieving and mourning with him all that day.
Verses 15 and 16 say, on that day, Bella heard that Joseph had perished. She died mourning him. She was living in Treef, and Diana also, and his daughter, died after Joseph had perished. There came 3 mournings upon Israel in 1 month, and they buried Bella over against the tomb of Rachel, and Diana also, his daughter, they buried there.
And in verse 18 it says, for this reason it is ordained for the children of Israel that they should afflict themselves on the 10th of the 7th month, on the day that the news which made him weep for Joseph came to his father, that they should make atonement for themselves thereon with a young goat on the 10th of the 7th month each year for their sins, for they have grieved the affection of their father regarding Joseph his son.
Now we're told that annually on the Day of Atonement, a high priest would sprinkle blood on the mercy seat to atone for the sins of the people. Of course, the mercy seat is put on the top of the Ark of the Covenant. And we're told in Psalms 110 that Yahushua is a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Our high priest is Yahushua. And 1 John 2:2 says, he is the propitiation for the sins of the whole world. What does this word of propitiation mean? Greek word G2434 tells us that it means atonement.
Now this 10th day of the 7th month matches on the Gregorian calendar with September 28th.
And this very well could become the day in which purchase by Yahushua could be completed. But what does the word redeem mean in Greek? What it means to purchase, to go to market, to purchase. And what is Yahushua purchasing us? This time he's purchasing the first 144,000 first fruits. Revelation 14:4 tells us these are they which follow the Lamb goes. They were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits to God and to the Lamb, redeemed, purchased. So yes, this Day of Atonement, the 10th day of the 7th month, the 28th day of the month of September on the Gregorian calendar, would be a very appropriate day to be redeemed and brought home. Now, the very next day on God's calendar is a Sabbath day. On the Gregorian calendar, it is a Tuesday. But on God's calendar this year, it is a Sabbath day. We are told to remember the Sabbath day and to keep it holy. And in Ezekiel 46, we're told that this is a day in which the inner court that looketh towards the east shall be open. And on the Sabbath day, and that's the day in which the Prince, Yahushua, can either enter or exit by that gate. So on the Gregorian calendar, the 29th of September is definitely the day in which we should also be looking at. And so the next date I'm looking at is October 1st, which is scheduled to be a harvest moon, what they call a harvest moon. And Sister Lily did say that, but Father Yah showed when the pole shift happens, there will be a full moon. And this first day of October on the Gregorian calendar would be the 13th day of the 7th month on God's calendar, which would then lead us to the very next day, the 2nd day of October on the Gregorian calendar, and the 14th day of the 7th month on God's calendar. So why do I have a particular interest? What happened on this day? It's because of the book of Enoch, chapter 60, which says in the year 507th month, on the 14th day of the month, in the life of Enoch, there was a mighty quaking made. The heaven of heavens to quake. And the host of the Most High and the angels, thousands, and 10,000 times 10,000, were disquieted with a great disquiet. The head of days sat on the throne of his glory, and the angels and the righteous stood around him. And a great trembling seized me, and the fear took hold of me. My loins gave way, and dissolved were my reins. And I fell upon my face, and Michael sent another angel from among the holy ones, and he raised me up. And when he had raised me up, my spirit returned. For I had not been able to endure the look of this host, and the commotion, and the quaking of the heaven. And Michael said unto me, Why art thou disquieted? The vision you have seen. Till this day lasted, the day of his mercy, and he had been merciful, long-suffering towards those who dwelt on earth. And when the day and the power and the punishment and the judgment in which the Lord of spirits hath prepared for those who worship not the righteous law, and for those who deny the righteous judgment, and for those who take his name in vain, that day is prepared. For the elect a covenant, but for the sinners an inquisition. When the punishment of the Lord of spirits may not come in vain, and it shall slay the children with their mothers, and the children with their fathers. Afterwards the judgment shall take place according to his mercy and his patience. And on that day were two monsters parted, the female monster named Leviathan to dwell in the abyss of the ocean, over the fountains of the water. But the male is named Behemoth, who occupied with the breast a waste wilderness named Laden, on the east of the garden where the elect and righteous dwell, where my grandfather was taken up, the seventh from Adam, the first man whom the Lord of the spirits created. And I besought the other angel that he should show me the might of those monsters, how they were parted on one day and cast, the one into the abyss and of the sea, and the other unto the dry land of the wilderness. Chapter 61 then says, And I saw in those days how long cords were given to those angels. They took themselves wings and flew. They went towards the north, and I asked the angels, saying unto him, Why have those angels taken these cords and gone off? He said to me, They have gone to measure. The angel who went with me said unto me, These shall bring the measures of the righteous, the ropes of righteousness to the righteous, that they may stay themselves on the name of the Lord of spirits forever and ever. The elect shall begin to dwell with the elect. So what about the days of Noah? Dead Sea Scrolls tell us, or Q252 fragment 1, that the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days until the 14th day of the 7th month, which was the 3rd day of the week. See how I'm showing you that God's calendar is precise and that I'm following it correctly? Because if you go back and remember that I said the 11th day of the 7th month was on the 29th of September. That would have been the 7th day of the week, the Sabbath day. And so following this out, the 12th day of the 7th month is the first day of the week, September 30th on the Gregorian calendar. The 13th day of the 7th month is the 2nd day of the week, October 1st on the Gregorian calendar. And the 14th day of the 7th month is the 3rd day of the week on God's calendar, October 2nd on the Gregorian calendar, as we just read. And the next day starts off Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, where we're told in Leviticus 23:39, also in the 15th day of the 7th month, when ye have gathered in the fruit of the land, ye shall keep a feast unto the Lord 7 days. On the first day shall be a Sabbath, and on the 8th day shall be Sabbath. So this 15th day of the 7th month on God's calendar would fall on October 3rd of the Gregorian calendar. And then 2 days later, on the 17th day of the 7th month of God's calendar, we see in the days of Noah, it being said in Genesis 8:4, and in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the ark came to rest in the mountains of Ararat. And the meaning of the word Ararat means the curse reversed. Hebrew word H780. Deuteronomy 11:26-28 talks about this curse. Behold, I set before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing, if you obey the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you today. And the curse, if you do not obey the commandments of the Lord your God, but turn aside from the way which I command you today, to go after other gods, which you have not known. So they thought they might have been getting away with it, but as Deuteronomy 30:7 says, And the Lord thy God will put all these curses upon thine enemies, and on them that hate thee, which persecuted thee. And Isaiah 24:6 then says, Therefore hath the curse devoured the earth, and they that dwell therein are desolate. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men left. Now, if we are to be taken home during this 7th month, I don't feel that it will be any later than through the close of the day on the 17th day of God's calendar of the 7th month. Again, if it's to be this year. That would match with October 5th, 2020 on the Gregorian calendar.
Now, of course, the timing of us being called home could come sooner in any one of those days spoken of earlier in the study. And in closing, as I just mentioned, Isaiah 24:6 in reference to the curse, continued in Isaiah 24:19 and 20, it says, the earth utterly is broken down. The earth is clean dissolved. The earth is moved exceedingly. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard, and shall be removed like a cottage, and the transgression thereof shall be heavy upon it, and it shall fall and not rise again. Sounds very much like talking about the pole flip. May you all be blessed in listening to this video. I thank you for your time.